Welcome to another episode of College Admission TV. Dr. J.P. Novin talks with Nuno Fernandes, President of American Public University System, about how APUS prepares students for AI integration through its APUS Signature Skills initiative and by promoting transparent AI use in the classroom.
Welcome to Season 3 of Higher Education Leader Podcast. We'll be covering AI education and the future of workforce. I do want to thank our sponsor, directadmit.com, helping students navigate their journey to higher education with clarity and confidence. I'm also excited to say that not only are you going to be able to listen to this on podcast, you could also watch it on collegeadmission.tv. I'm your host, JP Novin. I'm honored to be joined by Nuno Fernandes, President of American Public University System. Welcome.
Thank you, JP. It's a pleasure being here.
Fantastic. Since stepping into your role in 2022, President Fernandes has been guiding one of the nation's largest fully online universities, serving more than 90,000 students worldwide. Many of them are active duty military veterans and working adults with careers rooted in education technology. You have positioned, American Public University as the forefront of innovation in online learning. No one could explain the impact you're making in training students in AI, flexible credentials in the US and around the world better than you can. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you end up being the president, and the success that American Public University System has had since you took the reign?
Well, thank you for your kind words. My career has been a bit different than most university presidents. I don't mean this in a bad or good way, just different, and I'll explain why. So I started, I'm from Europe, originally from Portugal, and I started, once I graduated, I started working for a German company called Bosch. You might know the name, car parts, home appliances, right? So I started there as an intern, and I studied finance, and I actually never worked with finance, but I started there as an intern in the marketing department, and then I made my career there for 10 years, and I've been working around the world, and eventually I came to the United States as their senior vice president for marketing and product management, and I was doing that job for 4 years, and I was approached by a headhunter around the year 2012 that was looking for a CMO for a edtech company. So a technology company that was working with education, with higher education. And at the time it was sort of, interesting because I never really thought about education as a service or as a product that you could market. I was just a consumer of higher education. But I always tell this story, and I'll be brief, but I started thinking during the interview process, I started thinking how much education has impacted my life and the life of my parents. My parents are first generation, and my grandparents were actually, they didn't know how to read or write, so they were completely illiterate. And my parents, they were the first in my family that had access to education, and they went to college, and my father became a lawyer, my mother became a teacher. And I started thinking how much that changed my life even before I was born. And it changes so much that today I'm here talking to you, and otherwise I wouldn't be here today, right? So I thought it was fascinating, sort of the butterfly effect that education creates in the life of people and families, and I was driven to try to promote that same effect in other families and other lives. So there's almost like a passion that I didn't know that I had about trying to impact people in a positive way. So I left consumer goods around the year 2012, and I started working for that company as the CMO, and it was one of the largest online program managers in the world at the time. I think at one point we were the largest one in the world in terms of managed students. We had like 300,000 students across the world, and eventually I became the president and CEO of that company. And in the year 2022, I was approached by another headhunter with the opportunity to be the president of American Public University System, and I was very intrigued by it. And I was living in the US for 12 years then, and I always had an interest in working in the US for the US because I was working in the US, but serving international markets. So I really like the challenge. I really like the people during the interview process. The board was fantastic. The chairman was fantastic. Everyone that I met was very well prepared, very smart, and I felt that it was a great opportunity for me, and I took it, and that's how I started here at APUS.
It is when I say American Public University System, do we also say APUS or?
Yeah, we say APUS, which is the same, American Public University System. We commonly refer to it as APUS, but we can say either way.
PUS?
APUS. American Public University System, yeah.
So at APUS, you serve so many military-affiliated students, adult learners, working professions, thinking about careers as you look down 5 years down the line. How do you think AI is reshaping the workforce for these students?
Yeah, that's a very profound question. Let me just make a quick introduction, because we do serve a lot of military students. We are the #1 educator of active duty students in the United States. We are the #1 educator of veterans in the United States, if you measure that by GI Bill usage. And that's how the university was founded, by a veteran, and with the purpose of serving those audiences. However, in the last years, and particularly in the last 3 years, we've been trying to expand also by serving other communities. So we've engaged in serving the families of the veterans and military students. We've engaged in serving quote unquote civilians. So that's a regular adult learners that have no military affiliation. And we're also expanding try to expand to other parts of the world internationally. So serving students outside the United States. So the university today probably has a ratio of about 70 to 75% of students with some sort of military affiliation or former military affiliation, and then 25 to 30% of students that are either families or civilians. So to go to your question, I think the disruption will be profound. And most of the times when I listen to people, with podcasts like this one talking about how AI will disrupt the workforce, I think they are probably more conservative than what it will really be happening. So the first transformation, it's going to be in jobs that are repetitive, that can be easily converted into a process. So for example, a teller, like a bank teller, you don't necessarily need a bank teller. A person working in a fast food restaurant, right, collecting the money or picking up the order. Someone doing maybe telemarketing. Someone that is doing some document review, a paralegal person, for example. Someone that is working with translations. Things like that will be disrupted, and I believe will disappear as we know them today. So they will be replaced by AI. Other jobs will be enhanced by AI. What I mean by this is that jobs, like for example, being a lawyer, being a medical doctor, I don't think that AI, at least in the foreseeable future, we could look at sort of dystopian future, 100 years from now, but I'm saying within the next decade or 2 decades, I don't see a world where you don't need lawyers or you don't need medical doctors, but AI, I think, will actually improve their productivity and their knowledge and their performance. So doctors will have access to tools that they don't have access today, and lawyers will be able to work much faster and probably much better because they will have now this sort of companion that is always there to support them. So some jobs will be enhanced, tremendously enhanced. Engineers, even people in marketing. But what I do believe is that even in these jobs that are sort of very sophisticated, like a medical doctor, like a lawyer, an engineer, I think the entry-level jobs will be highly disrupted. And I think that's actually already happening. And I just read recently that the unemployment rate today with younger people, I think it's double than the national average. And I think one of the reasons for that is that these sort of entry-level jobs, they are being substituted by technology, because In the past, you might need someone, in a law firm, you might need someone to the entry-level job would be to review contracts and provide feedback, right? That's the entry-level job. Well, now you have a machine that can do that for you. If you might have in healthcare, you might have a person that all that person did was like to look at blood results and provide an initial report diagnostic. Well, now maybe a machine can do that. And so those sort of entry-level jobs, they will be disrupted. But conversely, I think the more sophisticated jobs, they will be enhanced by AI. So it's going to be a mix of both. And then the third part that people don't really talk about, which I think is really interesting, is there are a lot of jobs that will be created that we don't know what they are today. So every time there's a revolution, you have a lot of jobs that sort of disappear, but you also have a lot of jobs that are created. So if you go back maybe 200 years in the United States, probably 70%, if not more, of people worked in agriculture, right? And today that percentage is much, much, much smaller, but everyone else found a way to do something else. And they are doing things that didn't exist 200 years ago. So I think with AI, we're going to see a similar phenomenon where some jobs will appear that we don't know what they are, and the market will adjust as it usually does. I do think that for entry-level jobs, there's here sort of a conundrum, because I don't know how to solve that, how the market will solve that. If those entry-level jobs can be replaced by machines, how those entry-level, let's say, positions will be, what those people will do, but that's how I see the situation.
Definitely AI literacy is a big concept that we're talking about, and enablement as part of it. I guess we don't know what we don't know as far as new jobs being created, but I still will ask this question: what are you doing to equip and educate students for careers that are changing, are potentially being disruptive? Or how do we prepare students with all that uncertainty?
It's a good question. And you mentioned AI literacy, and I'll start there. So at APUS, we are introducing a concept called APUS Signature Skills. And what we're trying to do is every student, regardless of the career they're studying, they will be learning about what I believe are 3 skills that will be important in the next decades. The first one is AI literacy, as you mentioned, right? So how do I use AI? How do I take advantage of that for whatever I'm studying, whatever I want to do with my career? That's number one. The second one is critical thinking. It's incredibly important, like how to interpret information in this era where you're surrounded by information every day on social media, on the media, on computer, everything. So you have to be able to discern what is real, what is not real. You have to be able to have critical thinking to understand what is relevant for your job, what is not relevant, and how to make decisions. And then the third skill is a growth mindset. So you do need to have this kind of entrepreneurship spirit. Even if you're working in a corporation, it doesn't mean that you're going to go and create a company for yourself, which you might do. But even if you are working for a corporation, for an enterprise, you should have this growth mindset to try to differentiate yourself from others. So those are the three critical skills that we teach: AI literacy, critical thinking, and growth mindset. Now, what APUS has been on the forefront of AI since the very beginning. I started September 1st, which was right around when ChatGPT came about, right? And I have an interesting story about that, which I'll mention in a second. But I've always had the opinion that as educators, we should not limit or certainly not disallow AI inside the classroom. I think the exact opposite is what we should be doing, because if we do eliminate AI from our let's say, if we don't allow our students to use AI, we're doing a disservice to our students. What I mean by that is that certainly when you graduate, let's say you graduate from accounting, and any career, let's say accounting, for example, you graduate from accounting and then you go apply for a job, or you already have a job, and certainly you're going to have a lot of AI tools that help you with your job as accountant, right? And if you have no knowledge on how to use those tools, you're going to have a disadvantage. So So it's a disservice to the students to tell them that they cannot use AI inside the classroom. We actually do the exact opposite. We promote usage of AI inside the classroom, but in our academic policy, we're very clear that if you are using AI, you have to disclose it. That's the only thing we ask for. If you use AI to do an essay, to write something, to do some sort of assessment, you have to disclose that you used AI to do that, and that's perfectly fine because that's how real life works. So the university, the way I see it, is supposed to prepare you for real life, and that's what we're trying to do. And I always go back to the 80s. There's a photo that I show when I'm doing presentations where it's I think in South Carolina, when there's a bunch of professors outside the school and they're protesting against the use of calculators in the classroom, right? And they didn't want to use calculators, and that didn't go very well for them, right? So it the same way that it was sort of ridiculous to not allow calculators, it's even more bizarre to not allow AI because you're doing a disservice to the students. Now, so we have that with our academic leadership. We're very aligned, and we have that ambition of preparing our students for real life and consequently allow them to be exposed to several AI tools inside the classroom. We also train our faculty, and we continue to do that, and we need to do more of that. But we've been training our faculty. We are introducing new AI tools inside and outside the classroom, and I'll be happy to talk about that if you want. And the story that I wanted to mention. So in 22, end of 22, ChatGPT came about, but I came across a study from 2011, and that study was showing sort of the evolution of computers and the power of computers. And that study was showing that in 2022, there would be a computer as smart as a human, according to the patterns that they were seeing. And that's exactly what happened with ChatGPT, right? That, and then others, that there's a computer as smart as a human. So that study also predicts that by 2045, we will achieve singularity. So that means that by then, one computer is smarter than all humans combined. So computers become the smartest species on Earth. And quite frankly, there's nothing happening today that prevents me from thinking that that's going to be the reality, right? So it comes with certainly a lot of ethical questions, a lot of social questions, a lot of moral questions. But it is true that the evolution and the acceleration of AI is evident, and as educators, we need to try to use it to the benefit of our students and the communities that we serve.
That's wonderful, and it reminds me of 2006. I was traveling the Southeast. I represented Microsoft at that time, and I was their evangelizer discussing how everything is going to go in the cloud.
Yep.
I probably met with 100 of the CTOs of the Fortune 100 companies and 500 companies, and I remember in the crowd sometimes, as I would enter these conference rooms, there would be someone who would manage their email servers, and they're like, "What happens to our job?" I said, "I would look for other stuff to do." Because this is all going to go in the cloud. This is not long ago. And a lot of times they would be devastated and even upset at me. I said, well, it's coming. And I know you've been very active in talking about the global digital journey. As you talked about it, you talk about the short form credentials. But yeah, let's talk about the generative AI policy that you have, the guidelines for student use of Gen AI, what you're doing inside of class and outside of class when it comes to your prospective students. In particular, I'm interested to know about your teachers and your instructors and your professors, because in some ways it starts with them and gets passed on to the students.
Yeah, so I would divide AI tools, for lack of a better word. I would divide the AI tools into categories. One category is the academic category, which is what happens inside the classroom. And the second category is like, general services, what happens outside the classroom. Mm-hmm. What happens outside the classroom is very interesting because we are a very large university, as you mentioned at the beginning. We have 90,000 students. So everything that we do has to be scaled by technology. It's virtually impossible for us to do things with just by hiring people. You would need to hire a lot of people to serve 90,000 students, and we are an online university, so everything that we do has to be done powered by technology and has to be done at scale, and has to be done in ways that we can serve students in different time zones, in different parts of the world, in different languages sometimes, right? So I'll give you an example of mental health. Mental health is something that is top of mind for us. I think it's top of mind, should be top of mind for everyone, but in our case, we've been very active on promoting not only physical health, but mental health in our community. And we have a suite of services that we offer to our students, to our alumni, to our staff, faculty. And we offer that by, one of the ways we do that is by offering that through an app. So it's a peer-to-peer app where the students have 24/7 support in 25 languages, and you know, if they receive basic support, but if then things escalate, God forbid, to something worse, then they are directed to other places, right? So it would be virtually impossible to serve 90,000 students in terms of mental health support 24/7 in 25 languages. Imagine I would have to hire, I don't know, 500 people, maybe, I don't know, maybe more, maybe less, but a large number, right? But now we can do that, and we do that free of charge to our students. So that was introduced in 2023, and we don't charge anything, and everyone has access to that. Then we have other tools, you know, more like, you know, face-to-face, like we're talking here, where the students can also benefit from that. Another example of using AI outside the classroom to benefit the student is, for example, with transfer credits. So transfer credits in most universities, and in our case, it was like that, and in many cases still is, because we're transitioning. It's a manual process, right? So you say, okay, I've done these 3 courses in University of Miami, and now I want to transfer to APUS. How many credits can I get? So that process is very manual, but we are automating that with AI to a process that goes, you know, from 3 days today, 3 to 4 days today, is going to go down to seconds, right? So it's much more convenient, is much more, it's a much nicer process for the student, where, you know, he or she doesn't have to call, send emails, wait 3 days. You know, it can be done right there on the spot, and then, okay, I have 9 credits, off you go. Another example, now going inside the classroom is that we are working on implementing a virtual tutor. So where this virtual tutor is one of the cases, as I mentioned before, with the medical doctor, with the lawyer, this virtual tutor is not meant to substitute the professor, is meant to enhance the professor, meant to make the job better and more scalable and more efficient. So if you are, like you are in California, right? And now let's say it's a Friday at 8 p.m. in San Francisco, and you really have, you're studying, you have a question, and there's really something that you would like to know now. But there's probably no one available at that time on a Friday night to answer your question. So you probably have to wait until next morning, or if it's the weekend, maybe until Monday, to get the answer that you need. And I believe that in this is not a service that is truly digital. That is as it should be. You know, if you have a question at 8 o'clock at night on a Friday, you should get an answer at 8 o'clock at night on a Friday. So the way to do that is by introducing virtual tutors that are familiar with the curriculum of that course, that are familiar with the materials that are part of that course, and that can give you any answer or most answers that you might have. So that's another thing that we are introducing inside the classroom. So these are some examples of how you can use AI to enhance the student experience or enhance the reach and the efficiency of the faculty to provide a better service to the students. You know, and this is very important because most public discourse around AI is about cost savings, right? Especially when you talk, you know, when you look at like business publications and things like that, you say, well, this company is going to save X million dollars by doing that, and that company is going to fire, you know, 200 people by doing X. And I think that in education, that's not the right approach. Certainly, as an enterprise, you always want to make sure that your costs are balanced, and if you can decrease your cost, that's fantastic. But the driver cannot be that one. The driver always has to be increasing your quality while decreasing your costs. They have to go together. Because if you just focus on one, let's say you want to increase your quality, and you don't focus on the cost, then you're going to become too expensive. If you just focus on decreasing the cost, but you forget the quality, then it's not a good deal for the student. So you have to always focus on improving your quality while decreasing your cost, which a great example of what I said is the one, you are inside the classroom on a Friday night, you want to get an answer, you get the answer right there. That's better quality than not getting the answer, right? And but I don't need to have a person 24/7 connected to the platform to answer that question. Another example is the one I gave you of the transfer credit. So it's a much better service to be able to get an answer in a few seconds than to wait 4 days. So it's more quality and probably lower cost in the long run. But they have to go together. They have to go hand in hand. As the president, I always look like, how can you increase the quality of the services? How can you increase the satisfaction of our students while decreasing our cost and scaling the operation?
So that requires people not having AI phobia, at least being receptive towards those tools. So there's some level of education that happens there because there's generational perception. But also, I think our listeners would be interested just which one of these, I mean, adoption is always a challenge, right? So there are a lot of tools out there, but they don't get used a lot of times.
Well, we have examples like that, by the way, too. We have examples of tools. I won't mention any names because, but we do have examples of tools that we've implemented and they had, very little success. But that's okay. And I'll address your question. That's okay because you only know if you try, right? You only know
exactly.
if you try, and you can never. You can never force these things, right? These things, they have to happen naturally, and they only happen naturally if you, again, I go back to my original point, if you provide a better service, right? No one is going to volunteer to use something that is going to be worse than what they have today. They will only use something if it's better than what they have today. And I think that eventually with AI, JP is going to be the same that happened, with the internet in the early 2000s, that it was just everyone was talking about the internet and .coms and this and that. And today that discussion is over because it just became a part of your life. No one says, I'm going to have a meeting on the internet. No one says, I'm going to go shop on the internet. People say, I'm going to go on Amazon. I'm going to go, whatever, Shopify, whatever it might be. But people don't say, I'm going to check the weather on the internet. No, people just go and check the weather on their phones or whatever it might be. Or just say, I'm going to send an electronic email on the internet. People don't say that because it just became part of your life. And I think with AI, it's going to be the same, very similar in the sense that we will have things that will be adopted and others won't. But the things that will be adopted, they will just become part of our life, and then naturally, we will no longer in the future say, "Oh, I'm using AI for this, I'm using AI for that." You're just using it.
So you mentioned this. I mean, as we look at industrial disruptions, going back to, the Industrial Revolution or automation or the internet, you name it. Even the internet, we had a bit more of a run rate than we have today with AI. The question is, we know eventually new jobs are going to come about.
Yes.
But as we look at the next 5 years, as you mentioned, entry-level jobs, even mid-level jobs like programming, we're 80% service economy. So all the retail jobs, some jobs in education, customer service, sales. I mean, in 5 years from now, that's an eternity for AI.
Yes.
Are we going to, should we be worried about social unrest? I mean, are we going to be able to create enough jobs for, to be able to retool our economy for, and have enough jobs for people to do?
I don't know, but I don't know, but I think we will. And and these things, there's always a hype around something, and now the hype is around AI, right? It's
Right.
all over the news, and you listen to it, 25 times per hour. But the true reality is that the if you take certainly some companies, maybe companies like Google or Meta or um, that sort of companies that have a very high level of production in terms of software, maybe they are using a lot more AI today than what they were using 2 years ago. And there's news that they created a team, but they fired the team because now they're using AI and things like that. But if you look at the overall numbers of employment, they don't reflect that. So I think there's a lot of hype around the things that we want to amplify as a message, right? So let's say if Microsoft, to use your example, and this is not a real example, by the way, just full disclosure, but let's say Microsoft, for example, fired 5,000 people because they are going to substitute these programmers with AI, right?
Mhm.
That would be all over the news, and people say, "Oh my God, this is incredible." But 5,000 people sounds like a lot, and it's a lot. But in the context of Microsoft, I don't know how many employees they have, but 5,000 is probably not a lot. So I think we tend to amplify the messages that that we want to sort of to communicate, and usually those messages, they're not the positive ones, right? We tend to amplify the messages that create sort of this concern or chaos or fear. And I'm not saying these in the sense that I don't believe it's going to be disruptive. I believe it will, but I think that as a society we're going to adapt ourselves as we always did. But I'm an optimist by nature. But if you look, for example, in terms of people working in the computer industry, the software industry, you go back to the 70s, I think the number was like incredibly small, right? The number was a few thousand people, right? And today, it's a very, very large number. It's an industry that didn't exist. Now, to your point, you're right, that the speed of acceleration seems to be different this time, right? It seems to be different. But we, again, I think the media amplifies a lot of what is supposed to be sort of shocking, but that doesn't necessarily reflect reality. I mean, you go to you see the numbers of these very large companies, and the number of employees, it's not going down. And I say on a general level, it's sort of stable. In some cases, it's going up. So yeah, that's my position. I think we will adjust as a society as we always did.
Yeah, I think the concern is current graduates not finding as much employment as in the past. So
well, that's a different question, which is I think very valid. Which is, is what I'm studying relevant in the near future? And I think that's a question that everyone should ask. Everyone that is attending higher education should ask that question. Again, I believe that that you should always think like, can this job be easily automated, right? You might be studying, for example, let's say German language. I'm going to just do an extreme example, not to be controversial, right? But let's say you're studying German language, and you really like German, and you have a German background, and you have this passion for German. But what are the options in the United States if you are studying German language? Well, you might be a translator, or you might go work in an embassy, or you might go work, for some sort of German company. But there's a few of them, but there's not a lot of options, right? So when you look and say, well, if I'm going to be a translator, well, that's gone because nobody's going to hire me to translate documents. You can do that, for free. Microsoft and Apple actually just came about with their new headphones last week that they say they have real-time translation, so you can talk to someone in German and you're going to listen in English. So that is gone too. So I think that you should, as a student, you should make the assessment like, is what the career that I'm pursuing as a student, is it fair to say that it's going to be disrupted by AI? And if it is, you should consider maybe changing careers. but that's not to say that you should not have a career. That's sort of another example of the message that is communicated and what the reality is. And the message that is communicated, in many ways is that, higher education is no longer relevant, higher education has no value, you don't need a higher education degree to be successful. And in many cases, that can be actually true, but you will notice that sometimes they give you this example, Mark Zuckerberg didn't go to college, didn't finish college. Well, but there's one Mark Zuckerberg, it's not a real example. That guy is incredibly smart, and he would be successful no matter what he decide to do, I believe, and they say Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all these cases, these people are special in the sense that they have this gift to create companies and to be entrepreneurs, and their success is not really an example for the common person that is attending college. The realities, I think there's two realities that are actually true. The first reality is higher education is incredibly expensive, and I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed, because over the last 20 years, higher education has increased 300% on average. And it's becoming so expensive that people are starting to doubt if there's value in it, right? It's just becoming so expensive that for the first time, people are saying, do I really want to do this? And I think it's a fair question to ask. But the other fact is that if you look at numbers, at facts, you will see that on average, a person with a higher education degree produces more than double the income over a lifetime that a person without a higher education degree. That's factual. That's not, an interpretation, that's a number. So when it's an average, of course, it might be that someone is doing really well, another person is not doing very well. It's an average. But on average, someone that attends higher education tends to make more than double the income of someone that doesn't. It also has other benefits. Apparently, I don't know if they are connected by coincidence or they are connected for other reasons. But for example, people that attend higher education, they tend to have a longer lifespan. People that attend higher education, they tend to have more stable families and things like that. So there are benefits that you could say from an economic perspective, that the chances of you being successful, if you measure success by how much revenue you produce over your lifetime, because other people don't measure success based on that, but if you measure success based on revenue, your chances of being successful are much higher, twice as higher than if you have a higher education degree than if you don't. But these stories are usually not told, because those are not, like to the point we were discussing before, those are not the stories that generate clicks. The other ones are. But the reality is that higher education has a value, and it's proven. And I think it will continue to do so. But the challenge, JP, now is, and you mentioned this, and it's a very smart observation, is there's always been a lack of connection between what you learn while you attend college and what you actually do when you get a job, right? So it's very hard for the universities to be fully connected with the workforce and with the job market. So it's very hard for you to learn things that are like the real relevant things when you get a job. An example could be, you're studying to be a medical doctor, and there's a certain software that helps you do a surgery. And, but the software that you have while you're studying is now 5 years old. And when you actually go to work, there's one that is now more recent. And that's the one you should have learned with, but you learn with the old version, right? So it's hard for universities to keep really tuned with times. And I think that now that is going to be even more evident, right? Where all these AI tools will be available. And that's why another reason of why I believe that we should promote AI usage and not be combating AI usage. Because you want to make sure that your students are as exposed as possible to what is really happening out there.
I love this idea about, in the 80s, pre-internet, information was really exclusive to, institutions of higher education if you wanted to move up. Now,
Yeah.
now it's ubiquitous. You could get it from anywhere. So you go for college, not just for information. In fact, IBM declared that over 50% of their job openings don't require degrees, and you could get, they use job experience, they use their own, they have over 1,000 certificates or what have you. And Microsoft and Cisco have had it for a long time. But with the proliferation of information, AI is now making that so much. They're packaging the information so neatly so you can get to the results even better. As far as, the vision for higher education, how do you think it's going to change with the advent of AI, the way we give degrees, the way we, the time it takes it and its efficacy? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, education is one of the areas that I believe is going to be more disrupted. And I always make the argument, and I'm going to make it again, and you can debate if it's correct or not, but I always make the argument that higher education is probably the only industry that has not been disrupted in 1,000 years. And I'm not, it's not hyperbole. I will explain why I say that. So when you go back to the first university in Bologna in Italy, let's say, some people say it was in Morocco, but it doesn't matter. Let's say 1,000 years ago in Bologna in Italy, let's assume that's true. And when you look at the paintings from that time, what you see is like usually a man talking, the professor, right? And then you see the students taking notes and, learning. So like a typical classroom, you have a person that is sharing the knowledge, and then the students are taking notes and they're memorizing things, and then they're doing an exam, and then eventually they graduate. So how is that different than what we do today? How is that different? We might say, oh no, today we have computers. Yeah, but the process, the actual experience in many cases, you go to a classroom, you have a professor there is sharing his or her knowledge, right? Because this person is an expert on a certain topic, and that person is sharing the knowledge, and he was a student. You sit in the classroom if it's a traditional university, and they're taking notes, and then you're going to memorize, and you're going to do an exam, and then if you pass the exam, you're going to go on to the next course, and then eventually you graduate. And that's not different than what they were doing 1,000 years ago. Today you have computers, today you have cell phones and things like that, but the experience in itself is sort of very similar. The first sort of disruption, which I would argue it was not a dramatic one, was with online education, right? Where now you don't need the physical space to deliver that education, because now you can deliver that through a computer. But the process is sort of, the experience is still sort of the same, right? You have a professor, and then you have the students, and then you are reading and memorizing and interpreting what they're teaching, and then you do an exam, and then you move on to the next course, and eventually you graduate. So with AI, I think that experience will be very, very disrupted for the first time for real. And it's going to be driven, as it usually is, by the students. So what I mean by this is that the expectation of the students when they come to attend college, university, they will expect to be surrounded by an incredible digital experience, because they are surrounded by that experience in everything else that they do, right? They shop online, they date online, they exercise online, they listen to music online, they see their movies online. They have all these apps on their phones and all these incredible experiences, and they game online. And when they come to the university, they're going to expect sort of the same level of digital experience in terms of quality of the platform that is delivering that education. And they will expect a level of sophistication that can only be powered by AI, because that's what they have in all the other things that they do. So it's a very interesting moment in time for education, because it will force universities to truly adapt themselves. Now, the thing that is unique about higher education, well, there are many unique things, but one of the things that is unique is that you have the accreditors, right? And the accreditors, they follow a certain set of rules and regulations and traditions, and they want to protect the quality of the institution, the quality of education. That's their job, and for the most part, they do it very well. And the fact that you have accreditors then also allows you, if you're accredited, then you have access to federal funding, and if you have access to funding, then you can offer that to your students. So it's not an industry that is so easily disrupted from the outside. It's not like when Uber came about, and disrupted the taxi industry. Because you could make the case, you could make the argument for just for discussion purposes. Okay, let's create a university without people, just with AI, and AI machines and all these incredible digital experiences. But most likely that university will never be accredited, right? Because it doesn't fulfill the standards of the accreditors. And if it's not accredited, then consequently you don't have access to federal funding. And if you don't have access to federal funding, then you will not be able to access the large majority of the population that wants to attend higher education, because they rely on federal funds to do so. So it's an industry that in many ways it's protected because of that. And consequently, I think the disruption has to come from within, has to come from universities that are inside the system, and that will be pushed by their students to provide a more, what I call, digital experience, which I think is really the next evolution of education. You had traditional, then online, and now digital. And I truly believe that if you are not thinking about this, and if you are a university that, as like I say, small to mid-size, your brand is not particularly well known. If you're not thinking about these things, you will have problems in the future. And I don't know if you know about, if you heard about Clayton Christensen, the late Harvard professor, and he said he had two prophecies. The first one is that he said, that 20% of the universities would close in the next 10 years. And then just before he died, he actually doubled down on that, and he said actually 50% of universities will close. And I think that I know that he was wrong in terms of timing, because it didn't happen yet. But I think he's right conceptually speaking. If you're not able to transform yourself, if you're not able to scale your operation, if you're not able to offer an experience that your students want to consume, that your students want to attend, you're going to have a problem. Now, of course, this does not apply to all universities. I would say, the Ivy League universities, they are a category in itself, and those universities, they follow special, let's say, they have other dynamic, and so I don't think they will be as affected. But for, let's say, regular schools, I think it will be transformative.
Yeah, actually, Clayton Christensen, we studied it deeply in 2010, as well as Moody's research before we launched Plexus, because of the headwinds that I think universities have been put in a very uncomfortable place, because for hundreds of years things were field of dreams, build it and they come. Yeah. And after the Great Recession, I think there's a great departure from that tradition. Everything from enrollment cliff to demographic cliffs to COVID, now to AI. And so, before that, universities didn't really like to do marketing and enroll. It's just an inconvenience. So they've been forced to evolve. Now the pedagogy has to evolve as well. So last question, in terms of where do you see, APUS be in 5 years from now?
We want to continue in this digital transformation that we've started in 2023. We want to be known to be a very affordable, accessible, top quality university. We want to be known for offering top quality education for a very affordable price. And that's why technology for us, it's probably more important than for others. Because as I explained, technology for us is a way to scale, to increase our quality while decreasing our costs and keeping our tuition stable and very affordable. We have a very low tuition today compared to most universities, and it is our intention to remain affordable as we are today, while continue to increase our quality and the service to our students. So if you ask me, we are continuously updating our portfolio. For example, talking about AI, we are in the process of getting our first bachelor's in AI launched. We are working on our master's in AI as well and our certificate. And we are working in other programs that are very sort of innovative. We have a very developed cyber portfolio. We have space studies. We have computer science. So we have programs that are very edgy, and we'll want to continue to do that. But I would like for APUS to be a reference in what top quality, affordable education means, not only nationally but also internationally. Hopefully, as I said, we didn't talk much about that, but we are doing our first efforts in going outside the United States. And I've worked with international education for 10 years. I believe that APUS is quite uniquely positioned to be interesting for many students outside the US that want to have an American education, but that can't come, or that for different reasons they cannot come to the country, or they don't want to come to the country because they have families, they're married, they have jobs. So I think we are uniquely positioned to provide that American education in several parts of the world. So again, it's my intention is to continue to serve our students well. You know, we have a very high level of student satisfaction, which is not easy to achieve. So we want to stay there and hopefully be more recognized than what we are today for affordable quality education. I mentioned in the beginning, JP, that APUS started, and proudly so, as a sort of military university, right, serving the military and veterans. And that's our original DNA, and we are incredibly proud of the work that we do with our servicemen and servicewomen. But we also have the ambition of expanding to other audiences. So in 5 years, ideally we are able to continue serving and being #1 educator of active duty, but also to serve other audiences.
President Fernandes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.